Hey, Smarter News. Today is a really interesting day in history that is related to almost every single news story that we're currently covering, but it might not be something that you hear about right away. Today is the birth date of the man who's considered to be the father, really, of modern photography. And he is the person that invented the daguerreotype. I want to show you what the daguerreotype looked like. So this is really the first time that you're able to get a print of someone in a shorter period of time. And let me show you what it looks like right here. We have quite a collection still because they lasted, they endured for so long. This is Frederick Douglass. One of the most interesting things about this technology is that the plate that this image was printed on was actually in the room with the person that the photographer was taking a picture of. And so one of the historians that we had in our research, and you'll see a little bit of this later today, talks about how that he believes that gives the image a certain energy that modern day photography doesn't necessarily have because the plate was in the room with the person. Let me show you something else. This is a singing group. This is right around the mid 1800s. Sort of looks like a singing group from today, right? And check out this shot as well. Let me show you this. This is a picture from a hot air balloon. So you know all those Instagram shots where people are hanging out of helicopters? They were doing the same thing in the 1800s with the daguerreotype. That, I believe that is Boston. I'm going to have to double check that. But this is that viewpoint. So why does photography matter? Why is it related to all these different news stories? Just think about how those images change the way that we actually view stories that we're told. Not even our own family stories, from our holiday cards to some of these major news items that we've even covered this week. You know, whether it's the Kyle Rittenhouse trial that we're watching, to what's going on with the border between Belarus and Poland. The images matter, and they give us an added element to our reporting that really is irreplaceable and allows a person to take away something without any words. And it's for that reason that one of the stories I'm about to talk to you today, I don't think has gotten a lot of coverage, because we have almost no images. And we don't have any images, it becomes very difficult for that story to compete with others. So I'm going to take a little turn from that. You're going to see more on the daguerreotypes on our site throughout the day, and we'll have a lot more images for you guys to check out. It's really, really cool. So quick note before I go to this international story, another international story, I wanted to tell you I did listen to the oversight hearing with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. Definitely a nerd alert here, because I actually listened to the whole thing, more than 3 hours. I was about to cut some sound bites for you, but to be honest with you, when it comes to any news on the U.S. border, I didn't find the hearing particularly newsworthy. So you really have a lot of political debate still about what's happening at the U.S. southern border. And one of the things I want to be really sensitive to is where are the new ideas from anybody? Because really you have two different examples of leadership that we've seen in a very short period of time when it comes to the U.S. border. You had a certain posture by the Trump administration. You have a different posture by the Biden administration. And ultimately, we still have historic numbers. So nothing is really changing the border situation. And that's where I'd like to focus our resources on Smarter News. Like, who has the new ideas? Because at the end of the day, you know, what's going on at the U.S. border isn't really good for anybody. And if you just want to pick one group, specifically not good for children that are making that trip. So just wanted to tell you a little bit, give you an update, because we talked about it yesterday. Speaking of children, that's also related to the story that we're going to talk about. I'm going to take you to Yemen. And Yemen is an Arab country. I want to show you where it is, bordering Saudi Arabia, very close to the continent of Africa, strategically really important, because if you see that waterway to the left, that goes to the Suez Canal, which allows oil tankers to cut through and not have to sail all the way around the continent of Africa to get to Europe. And then on the other side, you can see Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and then there's Iran. There's something called the Strait of Hormuz, which is a very small channel right near the United Arab Emirates. This is another really important channel for oil and the movement of oil for oil tankers. So this is strategically important, geopolitically an important country, but a very, very, very poor country. And the site of what the UN called the worst humanitarian crisis in the entire world. UNICEF says really the country is near total economic collapse. And although there's different ways that one gets designated the site of a famine, I mean, essentially that's what's happening there too. Why is that happening? Because it's the site of a civil war. Why does Yemen matter? For all sorts of reasons besides just simply the humanitarian one. We talked a little bit about geopolitics. It's also the home to one of the most prominent Al-Qaeda branches, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And that's one of the reasons why America has had a presence in Yemen over the last, several decades because of that and because of our counterterrorism efforts. But we also have interest in who has control of Yemen. And what you're really seeing in this civil war is a proxy war between two sides. So your proxy war, you have two different sides, two different groups, one backed by Saudi Arabia and the United States, essentially, and the other backed by Iran. Those backed by Iran are called Houthi rebels. It's not something that you're going to really hear about outside of Yemen. It's a group specific to Yemen. And these rebels and the security situation deteriorated so much that the United States closed its embassy in Yemen several years ago. So we don't have an active diplomatic mission. That said, we still have the compound that our embassy is in. And just a reminder, when you have an embassy overseas, it's like having a piece of the United States in a foreign country. So if I walked into the Chinese embassy in the United States, I'm technically in China. I'm no longer in the United States. So here's what happened. The Houthi rebels took over the U.S. compound in the capital, what was known as the capital of Yemen. And there were U.S. employees there. We don't really know exactly who they are. They've been referenced in different ways. Apparently, U.S. employees, so we believe that means they're Yemeni, that were taken and detained by these rebels and are essentially hostages. We don't have any images of these people. We don't have any images of what happened. But anytime any U.S. employee anywhere in the world is taken hostage, it's really notable. And it's a story that just kind of hasn't gotten a lot of attention. The U.S. State Department has talked about it. And they say basically the situation is ongoing. I don't have identities. I don't have numbers. I don't really know what's going on. And it's one of those stories that has raised a red flag. Listen, it got some coverage early on by what you would consider conservative media outlets. But as I looked more into the story, the State Department's been very clear about speaking about it. So something's happening in Yemen, and we don't really know precisely what it is. But I think it's important that Yemen is the site of the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Instability there is not good for many different reasons, including the very big countries that are involved with the civil war and terrorism. The United States has a presence in the country of some sort. We've had very active counterterrorism campaigns in the past. But what's really going on there? That's really the question. I don't have an answer, but I think it's an important story for you to know about. So that's what I just wanted to put on your radar today. We have a couple other big domestic stories that we're going to be covering for you as well. So we'll watch what's happening in Yemen. The U.S. Secretary of State has been traveling all week. And so that disrupts like a typical press briefing. But it's a story that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Because again, anytime, anywhere in the world, anyone related to the United States government is detained or taken hostage, especially by a group that's backed by Iran, a U.S. state designated sponsor of terror, I think we have to pay attention. There's a lot of things just on the horizon, just on that. There's a question about whether or not the Biden administration is going to re-engage with these nuclear talks with Iran. We don't know if that's necessarily a part of this puzzle, but we have a couple of stories also on the horizon that we're going to be watching. So more on all these stories, quite a diversity of topics, right? But more on all these stories on smarternews.com. Questions and comments, let me know. Always great to see you guys, and thank you so much for your support. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.